Okay, so moving on here, I want to show you one possible way of classifying dynamic events. And this will be done based on the impact velocity. So let's say we consider here on the vertical axis the characteristic time in seconds, and on the horizontal axis the impact velocity in meters per second. So as the first group of dynamic events, we will have what we call a low velocity impact. And one possible example in this category would be a drop test. So let's say we have a drop test of a container for a chemical product, for example, as illustrated in the figure. So we are talking about an impact velocity of less than 50 meters per second. And the time scale is of the order of 0.1 milliseconds. So the 50 meters per second here is a notional value. So we could be talking about a bit less or a bit more than that. But in this same category, we will have most of the vehicle crash tests. We will have many of the design of sports gear or sports equipment. So we'll be often talking about low velocity impacts in these areas. Moving on to the next stage, where we will be considering impact velocities between 50 and 1000 meters per second. We have what we call a high velocity impact. And in this case, we are already talking about projectiles. So standard projectiles. So a bullet traveling at 300 meters per second, 400 meters per second. So you are talking about events that are happening in a time scale of the order of a few microseconds. Okay, that's what we would call a high velocity impact. Then if we move on to the next stage, so now we're talking about an impact velocity between 1000 and 10,000 meters per second. So we would call this a very high velocity impact. So here we are already talking about things happening in space, for example. So the impact of space debris on satellites, for example. So this type of phenomena involve high levels of energy. So the impact energy involved in this type of problem is extremely high. So note that we are talking about up to 10,000 meters per second. So above that impact velocity of 10,000 meters per second, we will have what we call a hypervelocity impact. So in hypervelocity impact, we are usually referring to interplanetary impacts. So the case of a comet colliding against a planet, or this type of thing. So the magnitude of the energy and the quantities involved in such type of problem is extreme. As a curiosity, if you get interested in the topic of hypervelocity impact, you can research about the Shoemaker Levy 9. That was a comet that collided with Jupiter in 1994, and the impact speed was about 60 kilometers per second. So that's roughly 216,000 kilometers per hour. So we have some photos here showing there were 21 fragments of this comet impacting against the surface of Jupiter. So you can see on the photos that were captured on that occasion, the brown spots on the photos are the points where the fragments of the comet impacted the surface. I really recommend you to have a look and do some online search about this. It's a very interesting topic.